In New York, this is The Economist. The Bank for International Settlements was founded more than 80 years ago as a temporary institution for reparations payments after World War I. Today, the bank is central to the global financial system, and it's also a talking shop for the world's central bankers. But beyond that, little is known about what exactly the institution does, and there are also questions about its lack of accountability. I'm Matthew Valencia, the Special Assignments Editor at The Economist. I'm joined by Adam Labor, who recently wrote a book about the BIS called Tower of Basel. Adam, the Bank for International Settlements, also known as the BIS, it's a very important institution, but it's not really very widely known or understood. Tell us a little bit about why it was founded and what it's all about, what it does.
Well, I always say the BIS is the most important bank in the world that you've almost certainly never heard of. It's the bank for central banks. It's the banks where they do their banking. So if you're a smaller central bank from a country, say like Macedonia or a country that doesn't have great expertise in central banking, they're there to help you. The bank was set up in 1930 to manage German reparations payments for the First World War. But those ended by 1932, which meant that the BIS really could have been closed down. The bank was founded by an international treaty, and its assets are legally inviolable. It has a similar privilege to the IMF or the World Bank or an embassy. It's almost extraterritorial, and it has only 140 customers. But last year, at the end of 2012, it made a profit of more than $1 billion.
So it acts in some respects like a regular commercial or investment bank?
Yes, it's the world's only commercial bank that's protected by an international treaty.
Tell us a bit more about its role during the Second World War.
Essentially, the bank was the main point of covert contact between the Allies and the Axis powers, the Allies and the Nazis, for post-war financial planning for Europe. The two key people involved in this were Thomas McKittrick, who was the president of the bank. He was an American president from 1940 to 1946, and Per Jacobson, who was the bank's economic advisor from 1931 to 1956. What I thought was the most amazing revelation was some documents I found in the OSS archives, which show how Thomas McKittrick was cutting deals with German industrialists in 1944. He was writing to them, and he's saying, look, if you cooperate, when the war's over, when we come in, we'll guarantee your profits for you. We won't decartelize you, because there was a lot of talk at that time of breaking up the giant Nazi industrial conglomerates. He said, you'll be fine as long as you stick with us. It actually says we'll guarantee your profits.
And the clouds over the BIS's reputation in more recent times, in fact in recent years, in the past 4 or 5 years, tell us about that.
Well, the first cloud, the background one, is the secrecy of the place. Every 2 months, the 60 central bankers, the most leading central bankers of the world, such as Ben Bernanke and Mervyn King and Mario Draghi, meet there to talk about monetary policy and the global financial system. But we don't know anything about those meetings. They don't release any information about them. We don't have an attendance list. We don't know what themes are discussed. When I raise this with the bank, they say, and also with the bankers, like Mervyn King says, well, we can't have these discussions being on the record, otherwise nobody would speak. And I say, well, look, you don't have to have the whole discussion on the record. Obviously, people need some confidentiality, but you could tell us who's there. What are the broad themes of the discussion?
Tell us a bit more about some of the more modern controversies that the bank has faced. I mean, I understand that in recent years they've faced accusations of shielding some countries' reserves from their creditors.
Yes, this is a very interesting story, which I think has quite important implications, and I think will eventually see some kind of change in the structure of the bank. Well, after Argentina went bust in 1991, it offered most of its creditors about 35 cents on the dollar, and about 90% of these people accepted that, but some of them didn't, and they tried to sue the bank in Switzerland, because that's where its headquarters. But the Swiss courts, and I think also the Swiss Federal Council, have said that the bank is founded by an international treaty. It is inviolable. It cannot be sued.
And this bank does more than we've already discussed. It's also it's a linchpin. It has a central role in the global financial system and the global financial architecture in bank regulation and in other areas, isn't it?
Yeah, that's one of the most fascinating things about the BIS, is that how it's continually reinvented itself. You know, there was no need for it to exist after German reparations. It should have been closed down after the Second World War for its collaboration with the Nazis. But it's always reinventing itself, and its latest incarnation is very clever. What they've done is using the bank as a place to host a lot of the new architecture of the global financial system, specifically the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, the one that has, you know, Basel 1, 2 and 3 and the 8% rule.
They set the capital adequacy ratios for banks around the world, right?
Yeah, that's not part of the BIS, but it's based at the BIS, which means its service, its secretariat is there physically. The people meet at the BIS. The Financial Stability Board is also hosted at the BIS.
And the Financial Stability Board, the FSB, plays an absolutely crucial role, right? I mean, it's one of the central pillars of the new emerging global financial
Absolutely, yeah. The Financial Stability Board coordinates the central banks and the regulators, you know, and that's a good thing to try and prevent future crashes and to stop central banks going bust and to kind of oversee the whole, you know, mess of commercial banking.
So if the BIS didn't exist today, would we need to invent it? And if we did, what would we invent? Or do you think there's really no need for what they do, or at least for that to be done where it's done?
What I argue is that the bank should be democratized, that it should set up some kind of foundation, you know, like that George Soros's Open Society Institute, and issue those shares to NGOs or young businessmen or people around the world. So give them a say in how the bank is run and bring them into the AGM so that you don't have this super elite meeting all the time of people. Now the banks, in their defense, they say that they do, you know, public work, they do training seminars, and they do bring back young bankers in to central bankers to show them, you know, how the system works. But it's still a very old-fashioned setup. You know, it was set up from the 1930s, which hasn't really altered that much.
Adam, thank you very much indeed for coming in to talk to us. That was